My name is Elodie Vance, and I'm 30. I didn't grow up rich. Neither did Nicole. Neither did our parents. Maybe that's why I can't tell you the exact day they decided they deserved luxury, only that it crept in the way fog does, so quietly you don't notice until you can't see the road. After college, I got a decent job in tech. Not millions, just comfortable. At first, helping felt simple. A grocery run here, a surprise bill there. Thank you lived in our house like a seasonal guest, always visiting, never staying. Over years, generosity became expectation. You have to pay for mom's washer and dryer. Why aren't you contributing more? Each request arrived dressed as obligation, perfumed with guilt. When Nicole got pregnant with her second and moved back in with our parents, the chorus doubled. Mom called every other day, a metronome of need. Your sister's kids need their own rooms. We're crammed like sardines. You're single. What do you need all that space for? I started to feel like a bad person for not buying them a house. Not helping with a house. Buying one. I told myself it was temporary. That they were overwhelmed. That if I just kept helping, they'd settle down. Appreciate. Stand up on their own legs again. Like they used to when all we had was one wobbly kitchen chair and a dented pot. That story kept me warm through a lot of cold nights. So I did it. I found a small, clean place on a quiet street, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a tiny yard, a single garage. Not huge. I couldn't afford huge, but it was new, unfurnished, and it had the kind of sunlight that looks like forgiveness in the mornings. I drained my savings for the deposit, booked catering for a welcome party, paid for deep cleaning and new appliances. I even ordered a silly little welcome mat with their last name on it. I kept everything a surprise because I wanted the first thing they felt to be love. On move-in day, I drove them over. I have something to show you, I said, too bright, like a kid presenting a lopsided cake. We pulled up and Nicole didn't get out. She looked at the house and asked if this was the temporary spot. No, I said, it's for you, your own place. She laughed. Actually laughed. This house is too small for a real family. Mom stood behind her and shook her head. Maybe next time, book a mansion. I don't remember what I said. My mouth shaped to the only script that never seems to fail women in my family. I smiled. Of course. The keys were still warm in my palm when they got back in the car and drove away. They went straight back to my parents' place. No thank you. No walkthrough. No questions about schools or utilities. Just an insult, scissoring the ribbon on my surprise, and the taillights sealing it shut. That night, I sat alone in the empty living room, catered food sweating in the kitchen, flowers by the window, trying their best to be the kind of bright that could make a person stay. The welcome mat, God help me, looked hopeful in a way I couldn't stand. I called the realtor the next morning and asked what it would take to list the house again. She warned I'd bleed money for reselling so fast. I did. Nearly 10% gone. I canceled the catering, returned what I could. I told myself that was the end. You can't break a heart that already decided to be careful. It wasn't the end. 3 days later, I got a call from my old neighbor who lives across from the house. There are people out front, she said, voice tight. Like a party. Cars up and down the block. Some knocking on doors. Confused. The house is listed, I said, feeling something cold click into place. I drove over anyway. By the time I got there, it looked like a wedding that lost its bride. Dresses, slacks, kids running, balloons, nudging the for sale sign like it had misbehaved. A guy unloaded folding chairs with the exhausted dignity of a saint. Nicole stood near the front door with our parents, Dad already wearing the look of a man who would rather not be counted among the living. They did not have a key. The lockbox hung on the knob. The welcome mat was gone. The for sale staked the yard in the same spot Hope had been. None of it seemed to matter to Nicole, who was in full hostess mode, hugging people and pointing to rooms through walls she could not open. Someone asked when the doors would be unlocked. When Nicole saw me, her smile dropped from her face like a glove. You didn't cancel the party? She said. I canceled 3 days ago. Her cheek twitched. She glanced at the guests and then back to me. You said, of course, she hissed. You said it with a smile. And you said the house was too small. I held her gaze because sometimes the only way to get through to my sister is to show her the mirror. You didn't want it. That was before I told everyone. Her voice went flat, like the truth had already been hauled off by a tow truck. They think this is our house now. You want me to say we're homeless? I didn't answer. I stepped aside and gestured to the sign on the lawn. People started noticing. A woman asked if this was a joke. A man asked if the event moved. Nicole's face went hard porcelain. She turned to the crowd and announced a miscommunication with the realtor, my fault, of course, and that the home wasn't ready yet. She promised a real celebration soon and then had the nerve to whisper that I should fix this before she looked bad. I left. I laughed alone in my car, not because any of this was funny, but because sometimes your body has to choose a sound to make when your brain is out of options. On the drive home, I decided to let embarrassment do what I never could, teach my family to stop. I should have known better. The next day, they showed up at my place. Nicole, Mom, and Dad. They didn't ask to come in. They swept. "Why did you list the house?" Mom demanded. "Why would you humiliate us?" Nicole wanted answers, apologies, a quick edit to the story in which she was always the credible narrator. "I'm not your ATM," I said softly, because I had spent years learning that my loudest power was quiet. The house was a gift. If you didn't want it, that's your choice. I'm done pretending. Nicole kept her chin high like a shield. "I already posted the photos," she said. "My friends have seen it. His family is coming next week." And there it was, what I had missed inside the hurt. It wasn't just ungratefulness. It was a heist. They had planned to take the gift, rebrand it as their achievement, and stand on it to look taller. They'd spent so long perfecting the story of deserving that they'd forgotten they were stealing. I told myself that would be the last act, the lesson, the new page. I told myself a lot of things I didn't believe, because the next time I heard from Nicole, it wasn't a knock. It was a group text to the entire extended family. "Hey everyone, sorry about the mix-up at the house. All cleared up now. Closing is this week. Celebration next Saturday. Same place. Can't wait to show everyone our new home." I stared at the message for a full minute, waiting for comprehension to arrive like a slow elevator. It opened on a floor labeled, "They are doubling down." Worse, the realtor had scheduled showings that week. I texted her a warning. She didn't sound surprised. "I've seen stranger," she said. "Do you want me to delay the open house?" "No," I said, feeling something inside me slide into a groove it had never used. Let them find out the hard way. Saturday, 4 p.m., the street filled again. Balloons, folding tables, coolers, the set of a fantasy. I parked across the street. The door was locked. The blinds were drawn. It should have ended there. It didn't. At 4:30, the front door was suddenly open. Music drifted out. People walked barefoot over brand new floors with red cups like they were christening a ship. My realtor pulled up behind me, took one look, and asked the simplest, sharpest question in the world. "Did you give them permission?" "No." "Then we have a problem." We walked in together. Conversations staggered and fell. Nicole was halfway up the stairs, giving a tour of rooms she couldn't name. Mom rearranged store-bought cookies like the kitchen had been waiting for her touch. They froze when they saw the realtor. "Who gave you access to this home?" the realtor asked. "It's our house," Nicole said without a blink. "We just don't have the new keys yet. She can confirm." Her chin lifted toward me like I was a signature line. I didn't say a word. The realtor didn't argue. She pulled out her phone and dialed. "Yes, I need officers at address. Trespassers in a listed property. Liability risk." Mom started whispering my name like a spell. Nicole grabbed my arm and demanded I fix it, because the story had already been told and I was ruining it by telling the truth. I turned and walked out before the sirens began. And for the first time, I realized, if peace had a sound, it might be the sound of not explaining yourself. The sirens cut through the neighborhood like a rewind button on shame. Red and blue strobes splashed across the siding, catching fragments of faces I'd grown up loving but no longer recognized. Mom's voice pitched higher than reason, trying to explain. Nicole crossed her arms, her defiance a second skin. Dad stood near the porch steps, staring at the grass as if it could open up and swallow him whole. I didn't wait to see the rest. The realtor stayed behind to manage what she called liability. I went home and sat in my car for an hour, watching the condensation creep down the windshield, wondering when exactly my family had turned into strangers. I told myself again, this has to be the end. But my family doesn't believe in endings unless they're the ones writing them. For the next 2 days, silence. No calls, no texts, not even Mom's passive-aggressive chain messages about family unity. The quiet was almost holy. Then Monday came. The email subject line, urgent compliance review. Immediate response required. My stomach dropped. It was from HR. Someone had filed an anonymous tip claiming I had used company funds to buy multiple properties and was laundering money through family real estate. I read it 3 times. It felt absurd, like a script too badly written to be true. But absurdity doesn't stop consequences. I spent the next 72 hours clawing through bank statements, transaction logs, old receipts, proving I'd paid for everything from my personal account. I barely slept. I barely ate. HR, looped in finance, then legal. Every question was polite, sterile, devastating. Did you buy a property for relatives? Yes. With your own money? Yes. Any connection between the realtor and your employer? No. They thanked me for my cooperation, but gratitude doesn't erase suspicion. By the time the internal audit cleared me, the damage was already done. My manager pulled me aside, voice wrapped in corporate gauze. Might be good to keep a low profile for a while. Low profile meant invisible. Promotions? Gone. Trust? Evaporated. And in that evaporation, one truth condensed. Nicole had found a way to reach into my world and poison it. I didn't need proof. Her fingerprints were everywhere, smudged but recognizable. I started documenting everything. Screenshots, voicemails, family texts, photos of vandalized property. I made a desktop folder called Self-Defense. 2 days later, the realtor called. Her voice was careful, the way people speak when they don't want to startle a wild animal. Elodie, someone vandalized the listing. How bad? Garage doors spray painted, back window shattered. Beer bottles, cigarette butts, the for sale signs snapped in half. What did they write? There was a pause. Hope your empty little house keeps you warm. You deserve it. I pressed my fingers to my temple and breathed. She asked if I wanted to press charges. I said no. The police wouldn't do anything unless someone was caught in the act, and I didn't have the energy to chase ghosts with my own blood type. I thought that was rock bottom. It wasn't. 3 days later, a letter arrived. No return address. Just my name printed in trembling ink. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper. You've done enough. Fix what you broke or you'll regret it. Taped at the bottom, a photo of me standing outside my office, coffee in hand, ID badge visible, taken from across the street. Blurry, but me. The room spun in slow motion. This wasn't about the house anymore. It was about control, a message that said, if you embarrass us, we will remind you who we are. I didn't call the police. I didn't tell HR. I didn't tell friends. Because how do you explain being hunted by your own family? I just sat there, staring at the photo until the lines blurred into something unrecognizable. Then I started changing things. Locks, routines, installed a cheap security camera outside my apartment door, checked my rearview mirror every night. For a week, nothing. No texts, no vandalism, no letters. Silence again. And then, just as I began to exhale, the phone rang. It was the realtor. Her tone was clipped. There's been an offer, she said. All cash. Over asking. No inspection, fast close. That's great, I said cautiously. Who's the buyer? She hesitated. Came through a shell company, but I traced it. The managing agent's name is Nicole Vance. The world stilled. Are you sure? Unofficially, yes. It took a moment to connect the dots. She wasn't buying the house because she wanted to live there. She wanted to erase the humiliation, rewrite history, reclaim the narrative, own the stage she was booed off. She was trying to buy it back to undo me. I told the realtor to stall. Give me a few days, I said. She sounded surprised. Elodie, it's a good offer. You could recover what you lost, maybe even profit. No, I said. Not yet. I hung up and sat in silence, realizing the war had quietly evolved. It wasn't about property, it was about narrative, and this time I wasn't going to lose mine. So I drove to the one place I swore I'd never return, the house where it all started. Not the new one, my parents' house. Dad answered the door. He looked older, smaller. Nicole wasn't there. He didn't even pretend to misunderstand when I asked, "Do you know what she's doing?" He sighed. She's been telling people for weeks the house is hers. Says you took it back out of spite. Do you believe her? He didn't answer the question, just stared at the floor. I told her it would end badly. She never listens. I left without another word. On the way home, I made one stop, a storage unit I hadn't opened in a year. Inside, boxes of financial records, letters, bank transfers, screenshots, and a signed IOU from Nicole for a $1,000 car loan she never repaid. By the time I drove back, the decision was made. No shouting, no confrontation. I was going to fight her in the one language she never studied: paperwork. The lawyer's office smelled faintly of coffee and old decisions. Books lined the wall like quiet judges. I put the shoebox of documents between us and watched him open it like a man unfolding a map to a place he'd never visit. Bank transfers with my name in the memo. Screenshots of group texts where Nicole announced our new home. The signed IOU tucked in a corner, her name, the date, the half-looped signature that meant she owed me $1,000 for a car she'd never repaid. He didn't look shocked. He looked interested. Interest, I learned, is a kind of kindness in legal circles. It means someone will listen and then act. "You've got leverage," he said without ceremony. He laid out the options like chess moves. Criminal charges, messy and slow, a defamation suit, public, expensive, or civil pressure aimed at reputation and quick resolution. "We don't have to drag this into court to make people uncomfortable enough to stop," he said. "Sometimes a letter does more than a lawsuit because it signals intent without the headlines." We talked timing. We talked optics. He asked about HR, about the anonymous tip. I showed him the compliance emails, the audit notes, the time my manager had told me to keep a low profile. He nodded. "That was damage," he said. "But it's also evidence of a coordinated effort. If we put together a letter that details fraud, harassment, and the attempt to damage your career, it becomes a tool." He used the word tool like it was a small, sharp thing. We drafted a cease and desist that night. Not just legalese and cold threats, but a narrative of fact. The house purchase timeline, bank records proving payment, the group text with Nicole's closing this week message, the signed IOU, the vandalism report, the notebook letter with the stalking photo, and the anonymous HR complaint. We included names, mutual contacts, the people listed in that fake complaint, enough to make the idea of escalation weighty without actually filing suits. The final paragraph was clinical and clean. Cease harassment, retract false claims, and repay documented debts or face civil action. The tone was precise. It was designed to make the recipient imagine the next steps. When the lawyer asked how public I wanted the pressure to be, I didn't know. My instinct had always been anonymity wrapped in generosity. Give quietly, retreat quietly. The house had taught me that generosity doesn't always come back as grace. Sometimes it comes back as a ledger. We sent it. Registered mail, delivery confirmation, and an emailed copy addressed to Nicole, CC, her boyfriend, and interested parties. There was a small, absurd satisfaction in hitting send, as if my finger had closed the trapdoor on a circus tent. 12 hours later, my phone buzzed with an unknown number, a short text. "You made your point. I'm done. Happy now?" It was almost laughable, mocking, like a stage dressing flapping after the thunder. My relief was raw and complicated. It didn't erase the spray paint, the shattered window, the letter with my photo taped like a trophy. But it did shift something. The silence that had felt heavy now held a hollow that could be filled with my own life. For a week, nothing new happened. The realtor called with bureaucratic updates. The buyer, supposedly connected through a shell company, hadn't closed yet. I checked my camera feeds more than was healthy. I slept awkwardly, panicked one moment, and calm the next, as if my brain were practicing both extremes. Then, quietly, the buyer backed out. She, Nicole's managing agent, withdrew the offer. The realtor said the phrase "no reason given," like a tarot card, flipped blank. On paper, it read like victory. In my bones, it felt like permission. Permission to breathe without checking over my shoulder. I kept the house on the market for a while, more out of stubbornness than profit. Eventually, a small couple with a baby on the way made an offer that seemed to fit the place like a hand into a glove. No drama, no fanfare, just two people who wanted a home, and me who wanted to sell it without another funeral for my patients. Nicole never called. Mom stopped sending those small, barbed messages about family obligations. Dad mailed a Christmas card that year and scrawled only his name. The distance between us felt sterile and final, like a room cleared of furniture. Nobody reached for the pieces. Relief arrived not as celebration, but as a subtle shift in rhythms. I stopped waking up expecting the next catastrophe. I ate a full meal without checking my phone. I let my shoulders drop when I closed my laptop. Work eased back into its own orbit. My manager offered me a new project after the storm. It wasn't a promotion, not yet, but it was a foothold on the mountain again. Some nights, though, my dreams carried the sound of breaking glass. Waking felt like forgiveness in small doses. I took pleasure in tiny, unremarkable things. A coffee that stayed warm. A plant I watered that didn't die. The way sunlight in my apartment stretched across the floor like a promise it didn't need to keep. The lawyer's letter had been a turning point, not because it humiliated anyone publicly, but because it changed the ledger. It converted whispered favors and stolen narratives into documents with dates and signatures. It reframed the story in a language my family disliked. Facts. In the aftermath, I realized that boundaries were not a single act. They were a series of decisions. A lock changed, a folder labeled and backed up, a letter mailed. They were the difference between being taken and being heard. There was no cinematic showdown, no courtroom television moments. The quietness after the storm was its own kind of justice. It said, "You tried to make me small and I refused. You tried to control the story and I took the pen back, not to write revenge, but to sign my way out." On the morning I handed the new owners the keys, I felt a curious detachment. The house had been a weapon, a wound, and eventually a closed chapter. As I walked away, I thought about the people who'd called me generous and the ones who'd called me selfish for stopping. Both labels felt inadequate. I had learned a harsher lesson. Kindness should not be a currency that erases your own ledger. In the months that followed, Nicole's life folded inward like a book someone closed without bookmarking. Her boyfriend moved out, the rumor mill said. She retreated. Our family's public life shrank to a polite distance. Sometimes the silence cut more than the vandalism did. I kept the folder titled Self-Defense. I kept the locks changed. And sometimes, on slow afternoons, I opened the storage unit again and sorted through old receipts, not to relive the wound, but to remember the weight of paper that had finally taught me how to stand. It's strange how peace doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock. It just slides into your life one ordinary morning when you realize you've gone 3 days without replaying the chaos. I woke up that Tuesday to rain tapping against my window. The same rhythm that used to sound like dread now felt like punctuation. Gentle, certain, final. I made coffee, fed my cat, and checked the security feed out of habit. Nothing but an empty hallway and the muffled hum of the world moving on. For the first time in months, I believed it. The war was over. The house sold 2 weeks later to that quiet couple with the baby. The realtor sent me a final statement. Clean deal, no drama, all signatures in blue ink. I remember running my hand over the page, half expecting the paper to burn from the ghosts attached to it. But it didn't. It was just paper again. Nicole never called. Mom didn't either. Dad sent a Christmas card that December. No letter inside, just his name, written like a sigh. I pinned it to the fridge anyway. Some part of me still needed proof that not everything between us had vanished. The funny thing about peace is how boring it looks from the outside. It doesn't sparkle. It doesn't clap. It just sits there quietly while you relearn how to live inside your own skin. I stopped checking my rearview mirror for taillights that weren't following me. I started sleeping through the night. I even said yes to a project at work I almost lost because of their nonsense. Nothing flashy, just something that reminded me I still had a future separate from survival. Every so often, I'd hear whispers through mutual acquaintances. Nicole's boyfriend had moved out, apparently after seeing the lawyer's letter. She'd tried to spin it, of course, calling me vindictive, unstable, jealous. But the story didn't travel far this time. Lies, I learned, lose their legs when truth stops feeding them. Looking back, I think the hardest part wasn't what they did. It was what I let them do for so long. I had built my identity on being the good daughter, the good sister, the reliable one who always fixed things. I thought if I just gave enough, they'd see me as worthy of love that didn't require receipts. But some people only understand boundaries when they crash into them. They don't stop taking because they're satisfied. They stop because you finally close the door. I used to imagine revenge as fireworks. Loud, explosive, public. But the real kind, the kind that actually lasts, it's quiet. It's deleting their numbers. It's selling the house and never looking back. It's realizing that being related doesn't make you responsible. It's learning that closure isn't something they give. It's something you create the day you decide they no longer get to narrate your story. Sometimes, when I walk past a real estate sign now, I think about that house, the one that started as a gift, turned into a battlefield, and ended as a lesson. I wonder if the new owners ever sit in the living room and feel the strange peace that lives there now, the kind that's born from chaos and reclaimed by silence. If they do, I hope it feels like sunlight. I keep the letter my lawyer sent, printed and sealed, in a folder labeled Clarity, right next to self-defense. Not as a threat, but as a reminder of what happens when you finally stop apologizing for outgrowing the people who built their comfort from your sacrifice. And I keep one more thing, the welcome mat, the one with their last name on it. It sits rolled up in the back of my closet, a relic from the day I tried to hand them a new beginning. It's stained from rain and footsteps, edges frayed. But when I see it, I don't feel bitterness anymore. I just feel distance, the kind that no longer hurts. Because in the end, it wasn't about losing money or reputation or family. It was about losing the version of myself that thought love required proof. And once she was gone, I could finally be someone else, someone free.